Hi, welcome to Ilanomics. We are back again live this week, and we intend to be live more often now because it's very interesting to engage with all our viewers and take your questions and answer them. Get Professor Ila Patnaik to answer and explain economics like only she can. But before we start our episode this week, I want to talk to you for just about 30 seconds on why readers and viewers need to pay for what they read and watch on the print. The economics of the media industry has taken a huge hit during the lockdown and before that during the slowdown. Advertising is in the doldrums, and subscriptions are the only way that can help sustain the industry, especially a startup, a young company like the print, which is just completed 3 years. We have some of the best journalists and editors in the country, and we need you to take subscriptions to keep this good journalism going. So please visit the print.in/subscribe. And there are various options. You can take monthly options, one-time options, both for readers and viewers in India and abroad. You will be doing a great service to good journalism by taking a subscription to the print. And for those who have taken subscriptions, thank you very much. You are doing journalism a great service. This week, we will talk about something which is very unusual, even by the standards of Indian economics and policy making. Uh, about a week from now, or maybe 10 days roughly, not many, all Indians who have borrowed money up to the amount of rupees 2 crores, 2 crore rupees, individuals as well as companies, will get a payment in their bank accounts. That is, uh, interest on interest that was waived during the moratorium period of April to September, 6 months. This was seen as an attempt by the government to help people who faced financial difficulties. But the government has not just restricted the payment to people who could not pay back their loans and who went for the moratorium. Even people who paid back loans will get a ex gratia payment in their bank accounts before the 5th of November. This, I mean, on the face of it, sounds a little bizarre. If I could pay back my loans, if I was, continuing with my EMIs during the 6 months, whether it was a house loan, a car loan, credit card bills, why should the government compensate me? To discuss this, we have Professor Ila Patnaik with us. Uh, Ila, on the face of it, doesn't it sound a bit bizarre, if that is the right word?
YP, on the contrary, I would say that if I was a good, hardworking, honest person, and I thought this is what I have to pay, and I worked hard and I paid it, and the person who got away without paying it, then if I was not paid and that person was paid, then it would really be rewarding him and penalizing me in some ways. So, in some ways, what this tries to do is to pay for what a burden that was created equally on everybody, and it does not create the moral hazard problem. The moral hazard problem is that people would think, okay, they can get away with bad behavior, and so they should behave badly, and therefore it makes sense not to reward those who did not pay, because we really can't make out, not the government can also not make out who really couldn't pay and who didn't pay. So that whole willful defaulter thing that had once been discussed a lot, and RBI had come up with some circulars on that, nobody could really make out who was a willful defaulter and who was a non-willful, let's call it that, defaulter. I think the basic logic of the government paying the interest on interest is that it's not something that any of us who took loans any of the businesses who took loans bargained for, or somebody paying EMI bargained for. And that's a cost that has been imposed to reduce the externalities in the system, the negative externalities that would be caused if we went about our business as usual. So, in some ways, if I go back to the first principles of public economics, if it is a negative externality uh, that the government decided that it's going to stop businesses from functioning, even if I wasn't really imposing a cost. Then the government, rather than the bank or the citizen, should be paying the cost. Uh, but having said that, I think the most important thing about this particular move of paying those who had paid is for purposes of equity and reducing moral hazard, keeping into account the experience one has had in earlier episodes where there were loan waivers or those who didn't pay, where bad behavior was rewarded.
Mhm. But Ila, this is not easy for the government considering the state of its finances. Uh, we know, for example, in a country like the United States, the US government has also been distributing funds to industries and sectors that have been in distress. And there is a different argument there about how they're doing it. But the Indian economy is not the American economy.
I think a total of about 8 to 10,000 crores is what is involved. Uh, Businesses that are small, below loans are small, that's what is involved. So, there's a cap. Big businesses don't get this support. Uh, but I think a very important part of it is to look back at the lessons of what happens when you don't pay everybody. So when you don't pay, when you just pay those who behave badly, you actually get, in the subsequent years, you get a lot more defaults on loans, and others would also stop paying back. So those who think that we have to pay think, but I don't need to really, because the government is going to pay up if I don't pay up. And because it spoils the credit culture so much, and because you do not want the banking system to stop giving loans to small enterprises because of this fear that they'll all stop paying. So it is really very, very important for the credit culture that you don't reward the defaulters. And after all, in this case, nobody's complaining. You think about it. The from if from the policy's point of view this makes sense, then you don't have this mass of people complaining that, look, I paid back, so why should I be left out? Why should I be discriminated against? So, even in popular terms, as well as from the principle of it, it makes sense. And as you said, the affordability question is limited because, out of the eight or so thousand crores that the government will need to put in, we don't know how much they would have had to put in. So, let's say if two-thirds of the loans were actually of defaulters and they are paying an additional one third more, then it's maybe a couple of thousand crores or more. We don't know how much exactly, but it might just make sense because you want the banking sector to keep lending to small enterprises and not to stop lending because they fear that this behavior will lead to expectations of government bailing out more and therefore will lead to more defaults.
Mhm. I would like to tell our viewers that we will be taking your questions. Please send them over Twitter and on the YouTube page. Uh, Ila, you use the word popular. Is this also a populist measure?
No, 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 no. I don't think it's a populist measure. You see, there was demand for people who had defaulted, but there
Mhm.
was no demand from people who had actually paid back. So it's not that there was a big hue and cry, and for that reason it was put in. I'm also very surprised. I'm equally surprised. Most governments don't really think about moral hazard and credit culture. So I remember I think was it 2007 or 8 when Chidambaram did this big farm loan waiver. Okay, that was one of the big farm loan waivers, which was very, very populist, and where absolutely no thought was put into what it will do for credit culture. And then that led to, subsequent studies have shown that that led to year after year, a bigger and bigger increase in the amounts put down by state governments and others for farm loan waivers, because then farmers felt that they needn't pay. So I'm equally surprised, as you clearly are, but it's not a populist measure.
Mhm. And in your column this week, we will be giving the link of the column in the description after this show. And also, people can go to the print.in and read Ila's column, Ilanomics, published earlier today. You make a distinction between what is being done now in terms of waiving the interest on interest and also the waiver of farm loans in the past. And we've had several of them.
Yeah, so farm loans were just waived off, as I said,
Mhm,
for those who had defaulted. And that's the
mhm,
biggest difference. That in that sense, of course, here
mhm,
it's also that it is not the principal and the interest which is being waived off for
mhm,
anybody. So it's only the
mhm,
interest on interest, which was the additional cost imposed due to the
mhm,
lockdown. If
mhm.
that time had not, if the lockdown had been, say, 1 month, then that cost would have been much lower. So those are the two big differences, that here it's only interest on interest, and not the principal and the interest. And second, that it is for everybody and not just for the defaulters.
We have a question from Vivek Muskan, Ila, and I will try to add in my own bit there. He's asking how much fiscal stimulus will be required to spurt growth or push growth. Would My addition to this is: would you see what this interest on interest waiver is uh, as stimulus?
It's too small to be much of a stimulus. Okay.
Mhm,
I think it's more in the nature of what is fair.
mhm,
So, you've imposed a cost on people. You don't want them to start going bankrupt. I think, from the point of view of the macroeconomy, if with
mhm,
small amounts of money being put down by the government, you can keep the economy going, then that's big bang for the buck. I don't expect, India to spend 10-20% of GDP on a fiscal stimulus. We don't have that kind of money. And many people think that, oh, you can borrow. But eventually, when you go beyond your domestic savings and you start borrowing abroad, even if there is some leeway today, for an emerging economy, it can rapidly disappear. High inflation, large capital inflows. I mean, there have been enough episodes in the world of sudden stops where large capital inflows may look very the easy way out today, but can put us in trouble later. While there is some scope, and many people have argued that there is some scope, but I think the kind of scope that you require for, say, 10 to 15% of GDP, you don't have that. So we are not going to get large fiscal. I believe we are not going to get large fiscal spending. And I've been, I
mhm,
think right from the very early episodes, we've been talking about this, that even though,
mhm,
we have by now among the highest numbers of corona cases, we cannot afford to have that kind of a fiscal stimulus. A
mhm,
small step like an interest on interest payment, if it can encourage both banks to keep lending and borrowers to keep borrowing and keep going, then it is good bang for the buck, because with a small amount of money you can keep the economy going, you can keep people getting jobs and businesses continuing to operate. uh, so that's what I think this is about.
mhm. Mehul Lad has a similar question, and I will try and rephrase it because it requires some clarity. Uh, he says, "Do you have any predictions or suggestions uh, for what kind of measures the government can take to boost demand?
I see. My prediction is that
Or suggestions?
so there are predictions and there are prescriptions.
Yeah.
Many economists have been giving prescriptions. I think if you look back at the last 6 months, you'll
Mhm,
find many saying that India should increase to 10%, 15%, blah blah,
mhm,
percent of GDP. As I just said, I don't think that either in terms of my prescription or my prediction, that's going to be the
mhm,
case. We are not
mhm,
going to see very large increases. So what will we see? So what is the suggestion? What is the way out? If you're not going to see large fiscal expenditure, what you want is measures that allow people to come out into the street to buy things, for businesses to start functioning. And my view on that is that the more we can do in terms of public safety, whether it is testing, whether it is vaccinating as soon as the vaccine becomes available, and distributing it freely, getting a good, rolling out plan so that you give it to high risk people, uh, include awareness in terms of use of masks, however we can make things safer for people to come out, that facilitation role, that increasing awareness role, that public health role of testing, monitoring, giving out vaccines, is the kind of role that the Indian government can play and can afford to play.
mhm. Ila, there are some other questions which are not directly related to the topic we are discussing, but they are, concerns about the larger economic distress and growth concerns people have. So Arjun has sent us this question on Twitter. He says Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, was able to privatize 30 public sector undertakings, the minority government, but why is the Modi government unable to privatize a single PSU in 6 years, despite a majority government? Does Swadeshi Jagran Manch have a veto on this government's economic policies?
I think that when you go back to thinking about the NDA-1 regime under Atal Bihari Vajpayee and what was achieved then the emphasis, and it had been the same emphasis with the Congress as well prior to the 99, prior to 2004, I would say, the emphasis had been on growth. So from 91 to about 2004, whether it was the Congress regimes or whether it was the Vajpayee government, the emphasis was on growth. And part of the focus on disinvestment, which we had seen through the 99 to 2004 period, was because of this emphasis on growth. You had these lots of public sector enterprises that were loss making, and it made no sense to keep resources locked into these enterprises. It wasn't so much a question of a majority in parliament. Now, remember what happened in 2004. I'm sure the person asking this is younger than that because that's our median audience. But anyway, that was an aside. What happened in 2004 was that the India Shining campaign, which was really about the fact that India had grown very fast,
Mhm,
did not give the BJP an election victory. So when the new government came in, I still remember the 2004, was it 17th of May, A.B. Bardhan of the CPI stepped out to speak to the press, and the new government, the UPA government that was going to come in, was Congress with the help of the support of the left. It
mhm,
said, Bhad mein jaye disinvestment. That was the first thing that was said. If you look back at the history of disinvestment, that was really the turning point, not
mhm,
only on the history of disinvestment, but also of this emphasis from growth to growth and redistribution. Or I think growth with a human face is what the UPA tried to call
mhm.
it.
Yeah,
Set up
yeah.
the NAC. The NAC was going to, monitor this National Common Minimum program and so on. So the Modi government's disinvestment has, I think, also been in that new mood of the nation
Mhm.
after 2004, where it is both political parties feel and, of course, their voters feel, because that's who they vote back, who vote to power, that
Mhm.
the emphasis should not just be on growth, but on growth and redistribution and welfare programs and so on. You look at the Modi 1 regime, compare it to the disinvestment program of the Vajpayee regime, then you'll find that the emphasis was a lot more on schemes that helped people, whether it was Jandhan or Awas Yojana or gas cylinder or toilets and so on, and much less on the, disinvestment and privatization and so on. So I don't think it's just about the numbers, but it is about the whole
Mhm.
change in mood after the loss of the India Shining program,
Mhm.
slogan government.
Aditya Burli. Thank you for your question, Aditya. He has a related question, Ila, and I think he's probably coming from the context of what has happened in the last few months, where ordinances have been passed to reform the farm sector laws, uh, labor codes. He says, at what point can we expect the Modi government to pass ordinances to implement the privatization of the public sector, which was announced during the economic package breakdown? I think he's referring to Nirmala Sitharaman's announcement that the government will get out of non-strategic sectors, and only in strategic sectors the government will maintain a presence.
So I think there are two issues. One, as I said, it is about the mood and election prospects, and this country is always in election mode. Whether it's Bihar or next it's Bengal, or so. One thing,
Assam.
so that's one thing, and that is that we are constantly in election mode. So look at what the reaction to the farm ordinances has been. You have the opposition up in arms, you have the opposition in various states trying to say that, oh, this means that MSP will not be paid, which is utter nonsense. Okay, it's complete rubbish. But people become they don't go and read the text of the law, so they become they're vulnerable to such kind of campaigns. So when it comes to privatization of let's say of public sector banks, then God alone knows what might be the kind of campaign. So I don't think we're going to see ordinances about that. And I think there's a second issue, and that issue is the role of the bureaucracy. Now, the bureaucracy is very, very afraid of various investigating agencies. And, to take a step which involves, say, fixing a value, uh, it might not be something that they want to risk, because when you're disinvesting, when you're selling, when you're doing strategic sales, you're selling to a private party, you can always be blamed for corruption later. And when you look back at some of the privatization that is being questioned, that was done by Arun Shourie in the
Mhm.
NDA regime and is being questioned now, you would wonder whether the bureaucracy would have the courage to go ahead and do a strategic sell off Santur hotel, sell off a loss making hotel with lots of debt for 1 rupee. Will they have the courage to do that? So I think there are these two elements because of which I don't expect any ordinances for privatization.
That's uh, that's not a very optimistic scenario for privatization, Neela. Garvit Gilotra has sent us two questions, and I'll take his second question. Thank you, Garvit. Uh, Garvit asks, the government has been talking about an urban MNREGA, Manrega, urban Manrega. What can it look like? Before you answer that question, Ila, I would also like to tell Garvit that we have done a report recently on the challenges the government is facing, especially the fiscal challenges on funding something like Urban Manrega. Ila, and we will give you that link in the description. Ila, your thoughts?
I actually don't think an urban Manrega is such a good idea. because we don't have facilities in cities to have people live here. Now suppose let me just go to one extreme and say, suppose what an urban manrega does is it increases the influx into cities. Where would it be? It will be in more slums. And cities are all cities infrastructure is something that we haven't solved yet, and cities are falling apart in terms of provision of water, electricity, particularly to poorer areas. They don't have land rights for people to. They jobs are difficult to get, and so if the consequence of an urban manrega is to allow people to feel, oh, we can go into cities, and if we don't get jobs there, then there's always a manrega to fall back upon. I think that until and unless you solve the governance problem of cities and how cities can provide safe structures. So I don't just mean the kind of slums that you find in
Mhm.
Delhi, which become unsafer and unsafer, with building without following building codes, without having proper water, without having sanitation, uh, garbage disposal, solid waste management, none of that at all. And then you have on top of that, you have a plan to attract more people to cities by something like an urban manrega. Then I think it's very, very short sighted and could actually lead to more problems than solving them.
One last question, Ila. This one is from Puran. Do you agree with the prediction regarding a quick recovery next year, or do you think we will have more years of slow growth?
See, I think we will recover, and next year we will recover fast. And the reason for that is because the hope is that within 6 months, either we'll all get herd immunity or we'll have a vaccine. Uh, I mean, yesterday's reports, which were that even Srinagar has 40% people with antibodies. That means they've had exposure, they have been asymptomatic. If that 40 goes to 60, then you are getting towards herd immunity by some
Yeah.
estimates. I'm not a scientist, but by some estimates, you're getting there. So, given that these are the two main, you know, obvious sort of solutions to the COVID problem, that one or the other will come through. Uh, One of the biggest issues for why we've had a decline in activity is because people are in their homes. And once people come out, then things are going to start again. And I think we will have a sharp recovery. There will, of course, be problems because, indebtedness, the health of the banking sector, government finances will, of course, be issues. And this is not to say that there will be no challenges at all. But I think that with COVID and the fear of COVID going away, we should expect to see a fast recovery.
That's ending this week's episode on a very optimistic note, Ila. Thank you so much. And I would
Thank
like to
you.
thank all our viewers who were with us through these almost 30 odd minutes and watched us. And we will be back again next week with hopefully another live edition of Ilanomics. Until then, please keep watching our other videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel as